Hi YouTube, it's Dana. I'm back again this week with a video. I actually just got off the phone with a friend of mine and I was telling her about my compost and how I had to go out and add some things to my compost this afternoon and make sure I turned it. Well, she just kind of said yeah, and she understood, and we kind of continued our conversation. Well, at the end of our conversation, she looks at me and she says, Dana, you're always talking about this thing compost. I'm not quite sure what it is. And so I just thought to myself, how could she not know that? So I started to explain compost to her. And so I thought, you know what, that would be a really good video because there's probably a lot of new gardeners that have no idea what compost is. They go to Home Depot and they buy it and they know they need to add it to their garden, but they don't really know what it is and the fact that they can actually make it themselves. So today's video is about compost. Now, compost is actually organic matter that is decomposing. And when I say organic, that means something like fruits and vegetables, real fruits and vegetables, not anything in a can, although you can compost that stuff. But you're looking for things that rot. So that is what compost is. It's just the decomposing of organic matter. And it becomes a very nutrient substance for your garden. And it is something that you really do want to add to your garden if possible. And you can make it yourself at home. And I'm going to tell you some things that you can compost. The first thing you want to do when you think about composting is, what are you going to put your compost in? And you can actually use several things. Compost tumbler, simple 5-gallon bucket. If you do want to use the compost barrel or the compost bin or the tumbler, the one that I just showed you, those run about, they can be pricey. I've seen them as low as $45. They go up over $100. It just kind of depends on what you get. Now, if you want to use the 5-gallon bucket, you can drill holes in it, or if you don't feel comfortable with the drill, you can use a hammer and a nail to poke holes. But of course, every woman should have a drill and know how to use it, but that's a different video. So like I was saying, you can use a nail and a hammer if you're not comfortable with the drill, and you can poke holes. You poke holes in the sides and the bottom, and that's so that your compost can breathe. Now, the next thing you need to think about is, what are you actually going to compost? Well, there are certain things that you should not compost. You should not compost meat or fish, and mainly because they will rot, but you really don't want to compost them because you will draw animals to your compost bin, and you don't want to do that. You do not want to compost any type of oil. You do not want to compost any sawdust that it comes from treated lumber, because that has chemicals in it. Now, if you are lucky enough to have a woodworking person around you and they have sawdust that is just from plain lumber, then by all means, please add some of that to your compost. The other thing that you do not want to add to your compost is glossy paper. And, years ago, when you would get a newspaper, it was actually, dull, and you could add that to your compost. The way the newspapers come today, there's so much ink, and the glossy things that come in your cell circular, I wouldn't even bother to do the newspaper. Now let's talk about some of the things that you can compost. Oh, I almost forgot. Do not compost weed seeds or anything with seeds. You don't want seeds in your compost because it is the perfect home for them, and they will actually begin to grow. So you don't want to do that. So some of the things that you can compost would be like the ends of fruits and vegetables that you're chopping up as you're cooking throughout the course of your day. Banana peels, cantaloupe rinds, lemons, or oranges. After you've squeezed them out or you've eaten them, you can compost those rinds. Now, anything that you do compost, what you want to do is that you want to make it as small as possible. I wouldn't go crazy and chop it down to nothing, but I would just make the peel, the pieces smaller. Like if you have a banana peel, take that banana peel and cut it up into just smaller squares. And the reason you want to do that is because it helps it compost faster, and it won't just be sitting there. You can also compost eggshells. Actually, you can even compost things out of your garden. Like, let's say your pepper plants. Maybe your pepper plants are done. You're not getting any more peppers. You want to pull them out. Well, guess what? I would rip off those leaves and I would stick those in my compost. And speaking of leaves, the leaves in your yard, they are perfect for composting. The only thing you really kind of want to do, now what I typically do is I put them in a plastic bag and I just walk over it. I walk over them until they're nice and, because they're nice and dry and crunchy. And that just makes them smaller so that they compost faster. So those are some of the things that you do compost. Oh, and don't forget with those eggshells, crush them up, because that will help them kind of disintegrate, decompose a little faster, and you won't have whole eggshells. Now, you are going to see some bugs in your compost. Don't worry about it. The bugs are doing their job. Now, if you decide to do that 5-gallon bucket, you put a little dirt in there just to kind of prime the pump a little bit, just to kind of get everything started. And then you can begin to add your kitchen scrap and things out of your yard, like when you mow your yard. Add those grass clippings. Go ahead and use the bag that's on your mower and add those grass clippings to your compost. It will help tremendously. Now, let's just say that you want to do your composting on the cheap. Well, a really easy way to do that, which is the way I started, is that I just dug a hole in my garden. I would have my compost. I would stick it in the ground and cover it up. Now, if you are lucky enough to have a deep freezer, and most people, depending on how many kids you have, that kind of determines how much waste you have in your kitchen. But if you tend to have a lot of waste, maybe you want to put it in a Ziploc bag and stick it in the freezer. And then once you have enough, you can go ahead and dig a hole in your garden, stick that waste in there, cover it up, and walk away. And it will compost for you. And so that's probably the cheapest way to do it. But once again, you can always use that 5-gallon bucket or the tumbler if you choose to. I hope that answers some questions about compost. Thank you for watching again this week, and happy gardening. Bye-bye.